Surf's up, guys. It's Mauisnake here, and I hope that you've been enjoying your IEM Cologne viewing experience. This playoff bracket has shaped up wonderfully in terms of some of the teams that we're getting, and I think a lot of people are looking at this playoff bracket and saying this is better than what we got for the major playoffs. And how fitting is that we get such a great draw for the final 6 teams going forward. The playoffs start within 24 hours. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. And we're going to break down the teams and ranking them as they move into the playoffs. So, what I have before you here are the odds, the outright odds before the tournament started. So, you can't bet on these odds anymore, but this is how Pinnacle ranked these teams and how much money you could have won if you bet on these teams before the tournament started. So, look at this juicy number already. Astralis, who had to work through the play-in, beating Liquid and Apex in the play-in. I thought they would lose to Apex. I think Apex kind of choked there, but Astralis made it through. They lost to G2 in the first round once they reached the group stage, and then they beat NIP, Maus, and Navi. I think those are 3 very worthy teams, and Astralis very much so earned that spot. Their outright odds would be a lot better today, but they're going to be up against Heroic, which is going to be a really tough matchup. Next team up was ENCE, and ENCE had 8.72x odds if you bet on them before the tournament started, and they didn't have to work through the play-in. They just worked through the group stage, but they beat 9, Fnatic, and Heroic. 9 and Fnatic, I think, are teams that ENCE should be beating all day, any day. I on the desk for the ENCE Heroic game really put my money where my mouth was in terms of I really thought that Heroic was going to win that one, and it was a super close match. I think that that was my favorite BO3 of the entire event so far. It was so neck and neck, and the highlight rounds from Nerds coming out at the end gave ENCE the edge that they needed in order to take that series, just barely squeaking it out over Heroic, and they had odds like this going into the event. They have already secured a semifinals berth, as you can see in the bracket above. But that's going to be against Vitality or Cloud9, who are also going to be incredibly tough opponents. Next up, G2, who are at 6.59 odds, and they also already have a semifinals berth. So you'll actually see that of the remaining 6 teams, the 2 teams with semifinals berths were ranked by Pinnacle as the 4th and 5th most likely of the ones that are left. So kind of interesting how that's actually all worked out. But I think everybody was a little bit worried about G2's form coming into this event, because what we saw at the Blast groups where they lost to Liquid, they lost to FaZe, they lost to Navi, and then it's like a totally different team. Once they came to Cologne, once they got to Germany, they beat out Astralis, FaZe, and Vitality. And dude, m0NESY looks nuts. He was a little bit shaky at the Blast Fall groups, but now that he's at Cologne, it's like this kid somehow found what he was good at before the player break, and he's back on whatever that tip was. And HooXi is still a hindrance as an individual player, but the calling is pretty good. Like, I trust this team a lot of the time on Inferno. I'd say that in the Vitality series, they did what they needed to on the T side. It's just that the CT side really let that's what really let Vitality or G2 is down, and I think that that's kind of honestly due to Nico and HooXi towards B. They had a really hard time, both of them. Nico went 8-13, HooXi went 8-15 on the CT side, and that's just frankly probably not going to be good enough against Vitality, who are going to hammer B hits, just like everybody is now in the Inferno meta, which is getting a little bit strange. I'm not bored of it. I'm kind of curious about it, because I feel like there needs to be a bigger counter right now for the fact that people just go for B hits and B pops so frequently. I think you need to probably like gamble a little bit more if you're a CT team now on Inferno, and I feel like that just hasn't quite developed yet. It's in a weird place right now, and I think a lot of people are starting to call for Inferno's head, but I don't think the map is still figured out. I think once you figure something out on a map, there's always a big adjustment to what has been figured out, and I think that we have yet to see that completely. The next team up is Cloud9. They had lightly better odds than G2 coming into this event with 6.58, and I think that's mostly, which is crazy because we knew G2 more or less for what it was as a known quantity, and that we've seen these 5 players play for the whole year so far. And with Cloud9, this is the first time we're seeing Electronic and Perfecto, and these odds, I don't think they knew necessarily that Axile was not going to be at the group stage, but now he's here. Now we are getting Axile in the playoffs. Buster did what he needed to secure Cloud9 a position into the playoffs, and I just can't even imagine what this team is going to do in terms of damage. I think Vitality probably were the most pissed off of any single party once they figured out that Axile is going to be in Cologne. The videos are out. He's walking through the building. and Axile he's walking through that door. Axile is walking through that door, and Vitality have to be very worried because we just don't even like the firepower on this team is crazy. When they have pop-off moments in mid-rounds, I am genuinely worried for the rest of the Counter-Strike space because this team now has a little bit more structure. They're getting into positions a little bit easier on their T sides. This is everything I wanted when I was calling for so long for a structural shift in Cloud9. And I love this team now. I freaking love this team now. I think they are fantastic. I think that they're going to win an S tier trophy by the time the CS2 major rolls around. I think they might already have one by then. They might even win this one. Like, this team is seriously so deadly. But I will say their opponents haven't been crazy yet. I will say that. So they lost to Fnatic in the first round of the group stage, and I would say that they looked a little bit disjointed. I'd say that Buster they said they didn't even practice with Buster at all, or at least Hobbit said that. So every single match that I watched of them, I felt like they were getting better. And then when I watched them versus Gamer Legion, I was like, oh, geez, that's a little concerning. But that being said, in their match versus Gamer Legion, which they won 2-1, and they had to win in overtime on map number 3, Buster was pretty bad. He had 56 ADR. And so just imagine 46 and 53 Buster, Axile, boom. Your worst rifler by a considerable margin becomes your best rifler by a considerable margin. Just basically tack on throughout a series 17 more kills. 17 more kills. That's what Axile is going to get you. And how easy are some of these going to, how like retroactively, how easy would some of these series have become if Axile was there for Buster? I can't wait to watch that matchup between them and Vitality. I think that's going to be so good. I think it's going to be crazy in terms of just firepower. And I think that some of these late round situations are just going to blow up. Like, I'm stoked for it. Next team, we have Vitality. You can see the odds are getting significantly worse now because it's 4.4x odds for Vitality going into this one. And what's crazy is that despite being major champions, they actually didn't have the best odds overall to take this. It is actually, as you'll see, Heroic with 4.23x odds. And to just go over Vitality's run, they actually only beat OG, they beat Maus, and then they lost to G2 2-1, which is how G2 got a semifinal spot. And I'll say that Vitality looked quite good with Flames. I liked what I saw from them for the most part at the Blast groups. There were some hiccups, like they lost to NIP at the Blast Fall groups, but I think that the rest of the opponents that they played against, Big, Complexity, EG, they dispatched it fairly convincingly in my eyes. And I think that there's still a lot of reason to worry about how good this Vitality team is if you're any other team in the bracket right now. But we're going to shift to Heroic, who I'd say actually in some ways, I think Heroic are playing worse right now. You can see the 4.23 odds. Throughout Cologne, they beat the Mongols 2-1. Like, they actually lost a map to the Mongols. They beat Monty 2-0, and then they lost to ENCE 1-2. And what's concerning me about Heroic right now is that I just don't see any individuals really, like, popping off. I don't know where Yabby's been at in this tournament. Like, Yabby to me has kind of fallen off. Versus ENCE in the series, he had 61 ADR. He was 46 and 59 in terms of kill death. And he's just not having those explosive moments on lurks that he was in the previous season. And if he doesn't really come up with that's been such a strategic luxury for Heroic and Cadian when their lurker is just popping off, finding like a single kill, and then just staying alive for the rest of the round. And then the mid rounding becomes so easy for Cadian. And so I'm for my money, like this, like, it's funny. I almost feel like Heroic to me have the second worst odds of winning this tournament right now. If I made the odds today, I would say that Astralis has the worst odds and Heroic have the second worst odds. I'd take every other team in the tournament but the thing is that Heroic has the potential to get a little bit better because in a post-game interview I did with Shush on the desk, he was kind of talking about the fact that when they're playing teams that they think are a little more chaotic, like the Mongols and maybe Monty, or a little bit more random, they're trying to find a style that will counter those teams. So I do think there's a slight possibility that Heroic were actually using this group stage and almost sandbagging it in a way by playing a style that they don't normally do, because when I was watching them, the mid-rounding was much worse than normal. Like, they weren't doing nearly as many active plays to try to get back into rounds. And so for me, and I think I covered every Heroic game actually. So I watched everything that they did at this event, and seriously, they they just feel like they're a step behind what they used to do, but they just didn't also seem to be playing the style that I'm used to watching them play. So at the end of the day, they got it done in beating the two teams they needed to qualify for playoffs. And then against ENCE, I think that they did try, but they just couldn't overcome the fact that Sun Pius and Nerds were just hitting so hard on the maps that ENCE ended up winning. So little confusing. And now we're going to look at Pinnacle's odds for the first two matchups. We don't have the semifinals matchup, so it's just going to be these two matches right here. First one, Vitality versus Cloud9. These are pretty stacked odds, and I'm a little bit surprised it's this lopsided with Vitality versus Cloud9. I think that Cloud9 is kind of worth a shot here with 3.14 because I do feel like over 1 in 3 times they would. I mean, I think they would probably win more than 1 in 3 times versus this Vitality team. So that's one to think about right there. I don't bet. I think I explained this. I have like a pretty much a disclaimer every time I do one of these betting videos. I don't bet as I do work on these broadcasts. But I also think that that's a little bit curious how low the odds are for Cloud9 to win this one. So something to think about. I'm super hyped about the team. And also I think that actually I think one thing is that these odds might not be ones. They might have been like released right before Axile was announced because that was just right today. That was pretty recent. And so these odds might not reflect that actually. Heroic versus Astralis. This is kind of where I think it should be. If not, actually, I think I would put Astralis at maybe like 3.1 also, because I just don't think... I think Astralis did have a pretty tough run. They did prove themselves in this group stage, but I think that Heroic are still a cut above them in terms of teamwork. I do think that Astralis have the best 2 players in the server, though, in BlameF and Device, but I also think that Astralis have the 3 worst players in the server. Like, I don't think Stare, Borup, or Buzz are better than anybody on Heroic. And I would take the team that has 5 middle, like, with the difference being as little as it is, like BlameF and Device, they are better than Heroic's players by a decent margin. But I also think that the other 3 are actually almost considerably worse. Buzz is doing pretty well for himself right now throughout the group stage, but I don't know if that's going to translate to on stage, and that's my big worry with them. And I also think that Astralis' calling is actually a little bit better than I would have thought with BlameF taking over. I talked to Shuhei about Astralis because he lost to Astralis, and he loves Astralis' T-side Ancient. He thinks that the way that they play it, where they throw early nades to B site to basically condition you, like you basically, if you're a B player on Ancient against Astralis, your main B site guy is just going to get bombarded with by utility, and then your cave guy can't even really help out because he's smoked off of cave, and so you basically have to play 2 on the site, but the nades are so good from Astralis that if you're playing 2 on the site, there's really not even enough spots necessarily that you're going to be able to play comfortably. So Astralis are like, they actually have a map that is their go-to map, and I don't think that Heroic are necessarily going to beat them on that. So this might be one map for Astralis. The thing is that if there's any team that's going to counter you tactically, I think that it could be Heroic. So I think that Heroic might find a counter in terms of utility. Like they might just smoke off B ramp immediately. Like that's totally possible. But I think that Astralis have such a strong grasp of Ancient right now. Like they might be the most meta forward team on it. That might be an ace in the hole for them. And then it's up to Heroic to try to win the other 2 maps. And I think that the thing is that I do think Heroic are very capable of doing that. I think they could probably win on Mirage. I think they could win on Nuke. I think they could probably win on Vertigo. And so I'm pretty sure that Heroic are good here. But I think there is opportunity. But I think the other odds for the other map are a little bit more lopsided than I would have expected. And so that's something curious and something to think about. But yeah, that's going to be it for this one, guys. Thanks for joining once again. This video obviously is powered by Pinnacle, and you can find them. There is going to be a link, and you could even just check out the odds if you want. You don't have to bet, but just check out Pinnacle's website, and maybe it'll influence how you perceive these matches, because I simply just like looking at the odds. I like looking at these, and I like seeing that what the bet makers, and I think Pinnacle's books are like really strong in terms of accuracy. I think if anything, I've looked at their odds sometimes and been like, am I seeing things wrong? And then usually the team that they predict is going to be right. So yeah, they're pretty good at what they do over there, and that's going to be it. Yeah, as always, follow me on Twitter and follow me on Instagram. And I'm also going to be streaming soon because I am actually moving. This is like a really little side thing, but if you're here this long, you probably like me, so you should know this. I'm actually moving back to America. I've been in London for 2 years, and I am going to be streaming again because I'm going to have a rig, and I'm going to have a setup, and I'm already figuring out internet stuff over there. So actually follow me on Twitch, but I might stream on YouTube. Like, I'm not sure. If you are still watching the video, tell me, do you want me to stream on Twitch or YouTube? Because I don't know, and it's kind of a big decision because it feels like what platform you choose is going to like really dictate your future in some way. So do you want me to stream on YouTube or do you want me to stream on Twitch? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, being toxic is a choice.